The clock on my nightstand glowed. 3 a.m., the darkest hour of the night. My eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. But I couldn't move. Not a finger, not a toe. It felt like heavy blankets were piled on top of me, pressing me down into the mattress. I tried to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. My throat was tight. So tight. A lump of pure fear was stuck there. All I could do was lie there, my heart pounding like a drum solo in the dead silence of my room. A cold sweat trickled down my forehead. Then I saw them. At first it was just a flicker in the corner of my eye. A patch of darkness that was darker than the rest of the room. I tried to turn my head, but I was frozen solid. The dark shape began to move. It stretched and warped like a shadow pulling away from a wall. It didn't have a face, no eyes, no mouth, just a tall, thin silhouette of pure black. I could feel my blood turn to ice. It was a person, but not a person. A shadow person, and it wasn't alone. Another one appeared near my closet door. I wanted to shut my eyes, to make them go away, but I couldn't. I was forced to watch as they glided across my room. They didn't walk. They floated, silent and smooth. One of them drifted closer to my bed. It was so tall its head almost touched the ceiling. It leaned over me, and even though it had no face, I felt it staring right into my soul. A wave of cold washed over me, a terrifying cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the cold of absolute dread. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own body, with these dark things as my guards. The fear was overwhelming. My mind was screaming, a silent, endless shriek. Run, get out, do something. But my body wouldn't listen. It was a statue, a terrified, living statue. The shadow figure reached out a long, wispy arm. Its fingers were like thin tendrils of smoke. It moved closer and closer to my face. I could almost feel its chilling touch. I squeezed my eyes shut as hard as I could, even though they wouldn't fully close. I braced myself for whatever was about to happen, my heart ready to explode right out of my chest. Was this how it ended? Frozen in bed, touched by a nightmare? With a sudden, violent gasp, I shot up in bed. I was drenched in sweat. My muscles ached from straining against my paralysis. I could move again. I frantically looked around my room. The shadows were gone. The closet door was just a closet door. The corner of the room was just a corner. Sunlight was starting to peek through my window blinds. It was morning. My clock read 7:15 a.m. I took a deep, shaky breath. And another. It was just a dream. It had to be. Just a really, really bad case of sleep paralysis. A nightmare. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound that came out was more like a nervous croak. I got out of bed, my legs feeling like jelly. I had to get out of the house. I needed fresh air. I needed to clear my head and forget about those horrible shadow figures. I decided to go for a hike. The woods always made me feel better. The tall trees, the chirping birds, the smell of pine. That's what I needed. Something to remind me that the world was normal and not filled with faceless things that haunt you in your sleep. I quickly changed and grabbed my backpack, eager to escape the memory. As I walked out the front door, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. It was a bright, sunny day, but for a second I felt a cold spot. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a tall, dark figure standing in my doorway. But there was nothing there. Just an empty house. Get a grip, I told myself. It was a dream. I shook my head and started walking toward the trail that began at the end of my street. The fear was just my imagination working overtime after such a terrifying night. That's all it was. But the feeling didn't go away. As I walked, I kept getting the sense that I wasn't alone. It was that same prickly feeling you get when someone is staring at you. I kept looking behind me, but the street was empty. No cars, no people, just me. I told myself I was being silly. It was the dream. It was just the dream making me paranoid. But the further I walked from my house and the closer I got to the woods, the stronger the feeling became. It felt like the dream was following me, and it didn't want to let me go. The moment I stepped onto the forest trail, the world changed. The bright sun was blocked by a thick canopy of leaves, plunging the path into a gloomy twilight. The happy chirping of birds stopped. An eerie silence fell over the woods. All I could hear was the crunch of my own footsteps on the dry leaves and twigs, and my own breathing, which was starting to get faster and faster. That feeling of being watched was back, but it was 100 times stronger now. It felt like eyes were on me from every direction, peeking from behind every single tree. I tried to walk faster, telling myself it was just the spooky atmosphere of the deep woods. But then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding against my ribs. I slowly turned my head. There, standing between two thick pine trees, was a shape. A tall, thin, very dark shape. It had no features, no clothes. It was just a void, a human-shaped hole in the world. It was one of them, one of the shadow people from my dream. It wasn't a dream, it was real. Panic took over. I spun around and started running. I didn't care where I was going, I just had to get away. I ran deeper and deeper into the forest, my feet stumbling over roots and rocks. I didn't dare look back. I could hear the rustling of leaves behind me. It wasn't my own anymore. It was a different sound, a soft, gliding sound, like fabric whispering over the ground. They were following me. How could they be here? How could they follow me out of a dream and into the woods? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, but nothing made sense. I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. It was a mistake, a huge mistake. There wasn't just one anymore. There were 3 of them, gliding through the trees, keeping pace with me easily. They didn't run. They just flowed through the forest, their dark forms weaving between the tree trunks like smoke. They were getting closer. I could feel that horrible coldness again, even as I ran, sweating and gasping for air. The forest felt like a maze, and I was the mouse, and the cats were right behind me, playing with their food before the final pounce. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they were going to give out. Just when I thought I couldn't run another step, I saw it through the trees. A building, an old abandoned-looking cabin. A surge of hope shot through me. A place to hide, walls, a door, a lock. With my last bit of strength, I sprinted toward it. The wooden porch groaned under my feet as I scrambled to the door. I twisted the rusty knob. It was unlocked. I threw myself inside and slammed the heavy wooden door shut, fumbling with the old iron latch until it clicked into place. I was safe. For a moment, I leaned against the door, panting, listening. The forest outside went completely silent again. Too silent. The cabin was dark and smelled of dust and decay. A single grimy window looked out into the woods. I crept over to it, my heart still hammering in my chest. I peeked through a crack in the filthy glass, and my blood froze. They were there, standing at the edge of the clearing just outside the tree line, all 3 of them. They weren't moving, they were just standing there, watching the cabin, waiting. They knew I was in here. I backed away from the window, my body trembling. The cabin was a trap, not a shelter. I was cornered. There was no other way out. Just the one door they were watching. I looked around the single, dusty room. There was a broken table, a collapsed chair, and a cold, black fireplace. It felt like a tomb. I felt a new kind of fear settle in. It wasn't just the panic of being chased, it was a slow, creeping dread. The feeling of utter hopelessness. There was no escape. Not really. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. The light outside began to fade as evening approached. Soon it would be dark again. Night. Their time. I sat huddled in the corner of the cabin, my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the door. I knew they were still out there. They wouldn't leave. They would wait forever. This cabin wasn't an escape. It was just a different room, a different prison. The horror hadn't ended. It was never going to end. I was trapped, and I would be trapped forever, chased by shadows for the rest of my life.